Bahrain Grand Prix will not take place in April. Will not take place in April.
Inspector Buxton there reading into the fine print.
Who loses here? Who wins?
The big losers here are the kids.
The business of Formula One is racing. It's not being at the factory, it's putting on a show.
The ongoing debate.
Cash is king. If they have to squeeze it in and everyone has to work 6 weeks in a row, people are going to have to work 6 weeks in a row.
A driver would learn to sing a national anthem backwards while juggling chainsaws if it gave him a tenth of a second.
Up to speed.
Well, hello, Will. Hello, DC. And hello, everybody tuning in to another episode. Welcome back, Will. You weren't able to be with us for our last episode. And unfortunately, Jolie isn't here today. But welcome back, Will. Tell us, have you collected your Oscar?
I know. But I mean, what an amazing night. What an amazing night for the sport. What an amazing night for the movie, for Gareth, Al, Gwendolyn, Gary, Juan, everyone behind the scenes who worked on the sound of the film. Just incredible. I mean, number one, amazing to be nominated for so many awards at the Oscars. To come away with one as well is, I think, beyond what anybody could ever have expected from this movie and this enterprise. But just brilliant. Like, F1, the movie won an Oscar. It's completely crazy.
So my wake up when I touched down in the UK, flying back from Shanghai, was Stefano Domenicali, the CEO, Formula One, going, DC. And I'm like, my God, what's going on? Are we about to have an emergency landing? He went, we won an Oscar. And I found myself going, yay, we won an Oscar. I did nothing at all for that Oscar. But hey, I guess we've been part of the F1 journey. We just weren't front and central like you were in the movie.
It's absolutely amazing, isn't it?
I have to say, we were really impressed at how quickly DC got back to get to us for that episode after China. Slightly surprised that, considering your major contribution to the film, Will, you were not offered to be on Brad's private jet to get you back in time for the pod. What happened there?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not used to the life of private jets like some DC. Or as we saw coming back from China, lovely photo of Valtteri and Lewis. No Kimi. I think he's probably still celebrating, isn't he? Couldn't make the flight. And now, do we know whose jet it was? Was it Toto's jet?
Yes.
DC can tell from the drapes. He's been on it many times. Yes.
Here's the thing, guys. We were talking about private jets and long-haul flights. Much more comfortable to be on a commercial. And if you're lucky enough to go on a flatbed in whatever class or ticket that would be called, then that's a game changer. You can lie flat, you don't suffer with, swollen ankles and feet when you land and things like that. So going on a private jet long haul is not actually as good as you would imagine, because, well, first of all, when you put the beds down, it becomes quite tricky to move around the cabin. Second of all, if you're lucky, and I'm sure Toto's new aircraft does have a separate bathroom for the crew than for the guests on board, but you have to step over everyone else to get to the toilet at the back.
Do you see me playing my tiny little violin right over here for you, DC?
This is the absolute definition of first world problems. Oh, guys, you don't understand the hardships. The hardships of flying on a private jet, guys. Honestly, it's so cramped, and you fall over the beds while they're bringing you your champagne and tucking you in nighty-night.
There's only one stewardess as well, a steward. So, you sometimes find yourself having to wait for a little drink. But anything over sort of 9-10 hours is more comfortable in a commercial. Then the CEO was on my flight. Lewis's mother was on my flight. I bumped into Fernando.
Lewis
Alex.
wasn't, though. Lewis took the private jet. Happy Mother's Day, Mum. Get to economy.
No, but Mum didn't want to be on it with all the kids. She wanted to be in her own private space. So, hey, look, private aviation looks a lot cooler than it actually is.
I can say, in my lifetime, I've only ever traveled on 2 private jets, which is already a lot more than a lot of people. One of them was a very short distance from Paris to London. And I have to say, it was way worse than the long haul one that I went on, which was an 8-hour flight. I felt every single bump, and I swear I was like crying for my mom. It was terrifying to me.
They are very reactive. They're like go-karts of the air. Anyone who's done any go-karting knows how physical they are. And actually, it reminds me that I survived a plane crash as well in 2000, which was tragically cost the life of the pilot. So, it's a reminder that, life is dangerous, but aviation is still one of the safest ways to travel. So how do we segue from that negative into something positive?
Well, do you know, DC, it sounds like you're our most reliable source here when it comes to drivers' travel. Who has a jet? Who travels together? How do these decisions get made? Like, do people pay for fuel when they jump on someone's plane?
Yeah, well, look, there's a combination. We're on a group here because a number of the drivers, old and new, live in the south of France, or more specifically Monte Carlo. I still do pay tax in the UK before any haters go, oh, you're not paying. I contribute to the UK system. I just don't live there. So we have a WhatsApp group to figure out who's going where. And we know Max has his own aircraft, and it's beautifully painted up in very recognizable colors. But the truth is, you can track any aircraft in the same way you can track any private boat as well, because of the insurance purposes. So people always know, if they really want to, which aircraft is flying where. Toto has his own aircraft, Fernando in Europe, and then the rest, as far as I know, Checo Perez, but he is still based out of Mexico, so he does a lot of commuting. And then the rest just group together and, pay your way.
Lewis used to have his own, didn't he?
He did, and it was candy apple red. But in the interest, I think, of saving the planet, he got rid of it. But of course, it doesn't mean that he doesn't fly privately. He just doesn't have the guilt trip of owning his own. But it's I'm not quite sure if that's carbon offsetting or not. But anyway.
It's guilt offsetting.
It seems to be that it's usually the same suspects that kind of travel together. Obviously it changes a little bit, but it looks like most of the time you see the same groups going together. DC, who would you say of those you've traveled with, and you can tell us who you have and haven't traveled with, which plane is the most fun to be at after the race? We know that you spilled some tea, or was it wine? I can't remember
soy
exactly.
Sauce.
On
soy
sauce. That was the one.
Briatore,
on Flavio's plane.
Team principal Alpines. Yeah, I still claim it was his Italian friend that did that. But yeah, look, I've travelled with most of the guys over the years. But I'd say the fun aircraft is whichever one I'm on, because, some of these kids take life way too seriously, thinking that, drinking mineral water and visualising a lap of Monza is really going to make the difference if they've got a car which is 30 kilograms overweight and 3 seconds off the pace.
Okay, so tell us, when you jump on board, do you pay for the fuel, or do you just offer incredible in-flight entertainment?
We all pay our way. That's the only fair way. And especially, my experience is the wealthier people are, sometimes the more mean they are. So you've got to be upfront on everybody contributing, because otherwise you get that, I'm sure you've got friends like that. You all go out to dinner as a big group and they never, ever put their hand up. But if everybody knows do you still use the expression going Dutch, where everybody is paying their way? Then there's absolutely no discussion. So, so that's the way we roll when we fly.
Fine.
DC, did you ever fly Stoddy Air back in the day?
No, I never. Polestar our own Minardi, which is morphed into RB, V-Carb, or however we're referring to them nowadays. No, I never did, because being based in Monaco since 95, then I never had that experience. Was it you used to have like a bunch of drivers and teams on board, no?
So it was great fun. Paul owned European Aviation, and it was unhinged, right? It was in the days when everyone was smoking on board. So you kind of walk in through the mist of just cigarette smoke everywhere. People are passing back bottles of champagne. You take a swig, pass it to the next row behind you, and then keep that going. The best fun was when you take off, people would put the safety advice mats, which are laminated. You'd put one underneath each foot. You'd hold onto the chairs at the front, and as the plane lifted off, you'd let go and you'd ski down the aisle to the back of the plane, get as far as you could. We had to stop that after somebody broke their arm. It was unhinged. It was absolutely unhinged, and just the best fun. So that was as close as like a PJ, because there were no rules. Like, it was just brilliantly unhinged.
Well, look, I think we could probably talk about PJ chat all day long, and I'm sure we'll get some more great stories out of you two throughout the rest of the season. But We should probably move on to what everybody has tuned into this episode for, which is the announcement that both Bahrain and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix have been cancelled. So, gentlemen, who wants to start?
I mean, no surprise, I think. When you see MotoGP delaying the Qatar round, when you see the World Endurance Championship delaying their Qatar round as well, I think it was only really a matter of time until Formula One ultimately did what they had to do with those two races. And given how soon they were due to be in the season, not enough time to get a replacement on board. And I know there was a lot of talk of would we go to Imola or Portimao or Istanbul, and any one of those places would have been phenomenal, and it would have been great to have been able to keep it up at 24 races for the year. But I just think the amount of time, the amount of work that has to go into it, because it's not just opening the doors to a racetrack and saying, come and have a race. You want to be able to promote it and market it and make sure that people are going to be there. And, there are so many considerations to actually hosting a race beyond simply just opening the doors and, letting people go and use your racetrack. So a shame to have lost two races, but I think ultimately the right decision when it comes down to it.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I mean, Bahrain not only would have been my first race back this season, so my maternity leave has subsequently been slightly extended, but Bahrain really is one of my favorite races on the calendar, so it is a true shame. But of course, safety is, of the utmost priority, and motorsport should never come first in those scenarios. So we know that that's the reason why F1 have made this decision. Of course, F1 also operate with extremely tight freight schedules, so that's another concern. I hear even that some of the freight that was there for testing still hasn't been able to leave Bahrain. Yeah. So it's just another example. But now let's talk about what this means, right? The calendar will drop from 24 races down to 22. We will now have an impromptu 5-week gap between the Japanese Grand Prix and the Miami Grand Prix. And there'll also be the support series like F2, F3 and F1 Academy who will, be losing some races as well. So let's talk about who loses here, who wins, and what the effect of this decision will have on the sport.
If we look at those that have been struggling in Formula One particularly, Aston Martin, for instance, Williams with a car that's a bit overweight, and Cadillac as a newbies coming, this actually will give them a chance to breathe, understand how the operations of their Grand Prix have worked in the first couple of races. We'll have Japan next as well. And then I think it will be a shot in the arm for those teams. The losers clearly are, as you say, F1 Academy, the fans, the sport as a whole. But we understand the reasons. But for those that will gain, hopefully it will mean we have a much stronger field as a whole when we regroup again in Miami.
There's been a lot of debate online on whether Formula One should have replaced these races. I know you mentioned, Will, there was talk of it potentially being replaced with Imola or a race in Turkey. I think that somebody even suggested that they should have just extended Japan like we may have seen in the past in the COVID years in Austria, where we did a double weekend on the same circuit. What do you guys think? Do you think that there should have been a way to replace these two races? Or do you think that, given the circumstances, 22 is where we should be remaining?
They've got the tracks.
I wouldn't have hated a double header at Suzuka. Do one the right way around, do one reverse. Let's go.
Oh my goodness, imagine that.
Imagine that. No, I wouldn't have minded a double header at Suzuka. That would have been great. They've also got the shorter track at Suzuka, which would have been cool. Again, trying to find a replacement venue is really, really hard at late notice. Although I'm sure Imola would have been there in a heartbeat. Imola was always around April time anyway for the San Marino Grand Prix. So
Silverstone would step up, I'm sure.
Silverstone would have stepped. Of course, Silverstone would step up. And there's so many teams within spitting distance of Silverstone. I'm sure that would have been super, super easy. Yeah, look, I think it's a shame. Look, it's necessary. I think it's as you guys have already said, real shame for Bahrain and Saudi and for the motorsport fans out there. Obviously, there are far bigger issues at play right here, but no, I think it's a shame they didn't replace it. Doubleheader in Japan would have been great.
Yeah, I won't write it off yet. I think there could still be an opportunity later in the year. I think that the decision's been taken, obviously, relatively early because just the logistics of trying to do everything, we've figured that one out. But there is time, and there are some other gaps. So we're effectively getting the summer break early if the teams wanted to enforce it. When I say the summer break, Formula One has a historical 3-week factory shutdown Well, they're kind of getting a little bit of that now.
I will say that obviously there's a lot of debate around what should have happened, but there's also a huge financial element here where hosting fees are not necessarily going to be paid, and we can speculate. And I think there's a number floating around the £100 million mark in terms of how much money is said to be lost. And if you even take into consideration activation and all teams bringing out sponsors, etc., there's a lot of money being lost that maybe could be recuperated if those events were held elsewhere. But as we mentioned, there is a logistic question mark here as well. Like, how quickly can you move that race from a Bahrain to an Imola? From a freight perspective, it's not that easy, is it?
No, and the interesting thing as well is in the wording of the postponement, because if you look at both of them, it said, I'm going to read it here. Formula One and the FIA have today announced that after careful evaluation, due to the ongoing situation in the Middle East region, and this is the Bahrain Grand Prix one, the Bahrain Grand Prix will not take place in April, right? Will not take place in April. So the door is ajar to it possibly being done a little bit further down the road. And I think that's a really important point.
Inspector Buxton there reading into the fine print.
So what do you guys reckon? Where could the gaps be? Where do you assume they might squeeze these races in, if at all?
Well, I remember back in the COVID days when we were forced to do a triple header and F1 said that was too much. We're never doing those again. And then they became sort of par for the course and a bunch of triple headers just appeared on the calendar. Once every couple of months. Hey, why not a quadruple header or 5 races?
Wow.
If they can find a space to squeeze it in, they'll squeeze it in. Because you know what? Listen, Lewis said it right at the top of COVID, when it was kicking off and we were in Australia and the race was yet to be cancelled. Cash is king. Cash is king. If they have to squeeze it in and everyone has to work 6 weeks in a row, people are going to have to work 6 weeks in a row. The almighty dollar doesn't sleep. And that's the North Star.
It is. And given that you've already mentioned, Naomi, that Formula One will take a hit. So Liberty, the owners of the Formula One business, will see less income from Saudi and Bahrain, which means in the distribution of wealth to the teams will see less income. Now, you could offset that by saying they've got less cost in not going to those events. But the business of Formula One is big business. And the business of Formula One is racing. It's not being at the factory and simulator time and CFD and wind tunnels. It's putting on a show. So we need to be on track.
And as you mentioned, obviously some of the prize money that's distributed to the teams is made up of the revenue that F1 makes. And these are 2 races that I think are some of the higher rollers of the locations we go to. So yeah, I don't think money, obviously, I know you're saying cash is king, Will, but safety is just a little bit above that. So we do understand the reason it's been done. But the question mark is, will Inspector Buxton be correct? And will this pop up later on in the year? 2 drivers who I think will be a little bit excited about having some time off, and you've mentioned them already because they have a lot of woes when it comes to Aston Martin and Honda. But we've seen the drivers, really suffering in the car. I don't know if you guys saw some videos going out where you could see Fernando taking his hands off the wheel throughout the race in China because he just was suffering so much. So how much do you think that this will do them good? Also, this could actually give Fernando a bit of paternity leave because he's got his baby coming on the way any minute now.
Yeah, he's not going to take time off from driving for that. But hold on a minute. Let's, again, keep things in perspective. And I'm talking with no knowledge of what he's feeling in the car. But I looked at the video and I've experienced flat spots in tyres, wheel weights coming off, and you get the vibration in the steering. The steering's physically doing that. I never stopped if it was a Grand Prix because you want the points. If it was a pit stop that was available, you do it. Have you seen these guys that work construction with the jackhammers and they're doing that all day, every day? We don't see them sort of going, no, I'm not going to come, I'm not doing work today because the job of being a jackhammer guy is making my hands sore. So, is it a little bit a convenience thing just to continue to put the spotlight on Honda? I suspect it's more the vibration is an issue for the reliability than for the driver, because here's my take on it. A driver would learn to sing a national anthem backwards while juggling chainsaws if it gave him a tenth of a second.
Yeah, I agree with DC, and it's something we've been raising right from the start of the year. Is this issue as bad as it is, or are they having to make more of it to try and get a greater level of dispensation to improve the engine? Time will tell on all of that.
time for the drivers to head back to base. The teams as well, as we said, it's been quite a lot of back-to-back events with testing, and then Australia, China, Japan. I think this will be an opportunity for the teams to get back and sort of download on all the learnings they've had. Of course, the teams are not just those who are on site, but there's obviously a number of the majority of the team members who are always back at base, constantly working with telemetry, etc. But I think it'll be nice for them to have this opportunity to just have 5 weeks to fully understand. And those few teams like the McLarens, even the Red Bulls, who are on the back foot, may take this as a real opportunity to close that gap a little bit.
How about, a great opportunity for the new teams, a great opportunity for Audi to take stock of what they've achieved in the opening rounds of the season, a great opportunity for Cadillac, who were only a few places outside of the points in their second Grand Prix weekend, something we've not really spoken about, I don't think. But to finish, what was it, P13 in China, was a solid effort from them in only their second weekend in Formula One. To have this 4 or 5 week break now after a couple of Grand Prix, allow those new teams time to just chill, relax, and look at, okay, what have we achieved so far? What's gone right? What's gone wrong? How can we improve? Normally they wouldn't have got that respite until the summer break, and then you're a good half to 3/4 of the way through the season. Having this little break right now, it could be hugely informative and instrumental in the rest of their rookie seasons for both Audi and Cadillac.
Well, look, there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to wait for updates on. I know there's also question marks around what will happen to Baku, what will happen to Qatar, and what will happen to Abu Dhabi. And we'll have to just wait and see. But in the meantime, we'll be keeping you guys up to date with any breaking news, or anything of the likes on our social media platforms. So if you're not following us yet, make sure you head over to your social platforms. We are at Up to Speed Show. Now stick around, because in just a little while, we will be getting a question from Niall Horan.
Hello Naomi, Jolie, David and Will. It's Niall Horan here. I'm a big fan of F1, so I just wanted to ask you a quick question, if that's all right. What song do you listen to get yourself hyped up for a race?
Well, Niall, thanks for that. I've got to say, I didn't really have a consistent song that I would listen to, because sometimes I was in the mood for a bit of uplifting music. Sometimes I just wanted to chill. It really depended on my mood. And I think that's the same on any given day. You don't have music blasting all the time at home, do you? So definitely something uplifting with a beat, something that kind of got you in the vibe would be good. Yeah, I was a bit of a fan of heavy metal, so that would have got me going, that's for sure. I think some of the drivers, Daniel Ricciardo, when he was involved in Formula One, he always had his headset on, and he would sort of record social clips of him doing sort of funky dancing and singing while he was driving. And some of the other drivers just don't bother. Unsurprisingly, Max, you never see him with a headset. But I think some of the drivers put the headset as a kind of means of saying, just don't talk to me. I certainly do that when I'm on flights. I have my in-ears in and I'm usually just listening to the sound of silence.
There's an interesting theory that music at a certain BPM is supposed to get your heart rate to that same BPM, so that when you get into the car, you are at the perfect level. And I think it was Katy Perry, Teenage Dreams was supposed to be like the perfect song for that, to kind of get you to that right level, that the heart rate is where it should be as you get in the car. But I've always found it fascinating what you guys listen to before you get into race cars. Like if you listen to something to amp you up, or if you need something to chill you out. I've always found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And I was going to say that obviously in F1 it's slightly different, because there's such a build-up between when you leave the garage, then you go to the grid, then you get out the car, then you go to the national anthem, then you get back in the car. It's like there's a lot going on, whereas for us it was slightly a little bit more straightforward. And yes, I always used to put my headset on, not necessarily to tell people not to talk to you, but there's just so much you're going through in your head again before you go out on track, and there's a bit of visualization and all that stuff going on, and you just don't want the distraction of everything else that's going on around you. I don't know about you, DC, but I used to sort of change the vibe of what I was listening to depending on the day. So if it was qualifying, I may have listened to something a little bit more chill that I felt really like got me a little bit more focused, settling the nerves. I think it has a real impact on your nervous system, music. So I think that for whatever reason, whenever it was qualifying day, nerves were slightly built up a little bit more for me anyway. And so I listened to something like more along the lines of classical music. And then on race day, it was very much that higher upbeat, like ready to go to battle kind of music.
Have you got a voice? When I'm just listening to you talking there, I'm just curious now. Can you sing? Because you've got a silky smooth, like a sort of Sade or something. Or are you into more? What would you hit us with some vocals?
My go-to karaoke song, which I want to hear from you two, is Hotel California.
Oh, wow. Let me hear you.
On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair. Something like that.
Oh, wow. There we go.
Oh my God.
What about
I'm
you
definitely
two?
not singing now.
No, I could not. I can only do like Oasis-y type, low growly type songs. But
okay, you've got to give it to us now.
Hey.
No. You're not escaping that one.
Well, I hear you.
I used to be a chorister. I was a choir boy when I was in my youth at Worcester Cathedral, and we recorded albums. One of which I believe went to the top of the classical album charts. So I've always had on my CV that I'm a chart-topping recording artist. It's not a lie.
Oh, wow.
But again, I saved the voice for karaoke these days, and it's not as silky smooth as Naomi's. I am definitely not
listen,
singing.
I'm not going to let DC off the hook there. So DC, give it to us. Come on. 3, 2, 1, action.
Oh, I've got a problem with it.
That's cool. DC, we've got
Not
Oscar
sure
winning
what that
sound.
was.
We've got Oscar winning sound people who can fix that in post. So you'll be absolutely fine.
It'll be all made in the edit.
I gotta say that the link between F1 and certainly racing drivers and music it's actually quite profound. And there are some great musicians, great drivers who've also been great musicians. Elio De Angelis was an incredible pianist, like an incredible pianist. More modern day, Liam Lawson's not bad on the old guitar. Those slightly older will remember a driver called Jaime Alguersuari, who was part of Red Bull's program. He became
DJ,
an
right?
unbelievable, not just a DJ, an incredible producer and songwriter.
Okay.
Absolutely amazing. But interesting, I interviewed Lando about this a couple of years ago when he became friends with Martin Garrix. And he said that he was really enjoying learning himself how to DJ. And he found that
press play,
learning to
press blend.
So learning to read the room, learning how to determine which track to drop when of an evening, and learning to read the crowd and what they were kind of giving him back in terms of the vibe. He said was basically like driving on a wet track. Ooh. And trying to find the line and trying to find the sections where there was grip. And it was kind of that going out and just lightly kind of threading it and feeling out the circuit was like trying to feel the room as a DJ. And I loved that comparison. I thought that was really, really cool.
That works.
Yeah, Will, I think one of the ones you seem to be forgetting is also Jacques Villeneuve, who had his own album out there. So I'm not sure that that's really on all platforms to find, but if you can find it, make sure you have a listen to it and let us know what you guys think. But yes, there's a huge opinion out there that the Formula One drivers, a lot of them are more than good looking enough to be in a boy band. And the fact of the matter is, as you say, Will, a lot of them have the talent to actually be in this boy band. I mean, you mentioned Liam, who's not only good on the guitar, but the vocals are very, very, very good, in my opinion. And then you've got Lewis, who's obviously been, who's released a couple of songs. I think XNDA, if I'm not mistaken, was his stage
on the
name.
Christina Aguilera song.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And he's obviously, we always hear rumors of him being, in the studio making music. So we can't wait to hear more of that. And then there's Charles, who plays the piano so well. So I think that we could probably all make one big band together. And I think we'll have to find something for DC to do because he's not making the band. Maybe like a background dancer or something.
I'll bring refreshments.
Amazing. Okay, well, look, that's all we have time for today. We could go on forever. To all the fans who would have had tickets to go to Bahrain or Saudi, our hearts go out with you. For some, it may have been their first time ever going to an F1 race. So I'm sure that would have been a tough decision, but again, one that was crucial to make. In the meantime, we'll be keeping you guys company here on Up to Speed. So hopefully that will help a little bit with the blow of not being able to go. Thank you for listening in. Thank you, DC and Will, for joining us. Remember, as I mentioned, you can follow us on socials at Up to Speed Show. And if you want to send us an email, it's uptospeed@global.com. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, and hit the bell notification where you can do that so that you never miss an episode. Now, we have episodes coming out every Monday and every Thursday, so we'll see you very, very, very soon.
This has been a Global Player original production.